Welcome to Mac Football Forever. I'm Alex. That's Caleb. Caleb with his recognizable, horrible Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah.
But Caleb, you don't need great Wi-Fi to get into the league. And we're going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about you getting into the league. We're going to talk about someone more qualified to get into the league. 10 people, specifically, I guess. The draft isn't coming up immediately. It's a whole news cycle that's, starting to ramp up, and we're going to have to talk about that pretty soon. So let's get prepared by, familiarizing ourselves with a pool of names. There's so much more that we could talk about, but we're just going to narrow the list down to 10 today. Not the 10 best, because we're not smart enough to say that.
No.
But just 10 guys that we feel like highlighting at this moment that may or may not be huge prospects down the pike. Caleb, when we look forward to this news cycle, though, what kind of excites you? Because I know that you and I kind of look at things through a similar lens when we, talk about prospects or just athletic talent in general in private. And now that we're doing this on a public forum, what do you enjoy about when it comes to this topic?
There are always a few guys that don't have the biggest buzz about them coming out of the MAC who tend to make rosters, or you're kind of following along as stuff comes around through the summer, and it's like, oh, you heard X and X from Toledo's made the training camp roster, or they signed a contract or whatever. And that stuff tends to keep me interested for a while. Whether it's Toledo guys making it with the Steelers, they've been Western and Toledo guys making it with the Steelers, or anybody just making an impact somewhere. I know I've mentioned him a couple times in recent episodes, Pat O'Connor, or Pat Connor. Why do I keep doing that?
It's Pat O'Connor.
It's Pat O'Connor, yeah. And
you do it because that's his name.
No, I just go back and forth between the two. Anyway, just guys who come out they're not super highly heralded, whether they're drafted low or not, and just kind of making a bigger impact than maybe they were originally thought to be capable of. And so there's a couple guys that stick out this year for me that you see what they've done, maybe even for teams that haven't had much success, and you're thinking, okay, well, have they really had a chance to show what they're capable of? And they might go on to more impressive heights, some impressive things once they get their shot at the pros. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But there are still a couple big names that people should be excited for if they are in that mood of, okay, football season's over, time for me to gobble up film to start being a MAC draft guru like I supposedly am. I'm not one of those things. Alex isn't really one of those things, but we can still give you a pretty good idea of who are some of the people you should be looking out for.
Yeah, and generally we don't get too hard over got to watch out for all these guys in day 3, because that's not always what attracts us to the draft. We're just sports fans too. We like the first rounders too, and it pays off to be one of those early rounders. And from the MAC, sometimes it's a rarity. This year, there's some argument that some of these guys could crack day 2 conversation. I don't know about day 1. But I would love to be wrong about that. Do you think that there's that kind of high-end talent in the MAC coming into the 2021 draft, though, Caleb? Because I think there's a few names that maybe a handful at most, but it's a good handful.
Without looking at really concrete prediction recently, there's 2 people I can see being up there, and kind of following the trend of offensive linemen. Tommy Doyle was already in the draft last year, and he was one of those guys that I just got the sense he's coming back because they're coming off a championship. They're still riding high off of that. And to me, it's I kind of didn't get it, because I was like, dude, just go. you already have proved what you wanted to there, and you're already highly thought of. He's got good size. He's got good skill. A lot of people think of him as one of the better guys at his position in the class, and so I didn't know if there was...
Wait, he wasn't in the draft last year, though.
No, I'm saying that he didn't need to, when August came around and he had declared for the draft.
Okay, I heard you the wrong way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's do you need to come back and play this season? But then the option was on the table. You can play the season; it doesn't matter. You don't need to play. He could just play and get ready if he wanted to. But he took the option to play with his teammates and try and defend Miami's MAC championship. The season didn't work out super great, but maybe more film helps him. I don't know. I do know that based on what I've seen from some of the gurus, self-appointed gurus, and people who write for these websites, they really like him, and I see more consistently positive and glowing praise about Tommy Doyle than I do any other player in the MAC who's entered the draft.
Yeah, and and now he's because he played that year, he's now a two-time first-team All-MAC offensive lineman. So hopefully he can be someone that cracks that day two conversation. I guess that's kind of the first name that we go with here, though, Tommy Doyle.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think he's borderline day two and day three, and I think based on what I've read, I mean between the size and the versatility he provides, he should be day two, late day two.
mhm. Yeah, and he has really good instincts too.
So
Let's move to another offensive lineman, someone that kind of graded highly, was recognized as an All American this year. Kayode
Awosika.
Awosika. Jesus, I should know how to say this. Um, he, like I said, All American tackle for Buffalo. They love to run to the left side because that's where he was. I'll never forget though because the play of the year, Jimmy Daw beat him, and had the play of the year. But anyways, Kayode, he's going to be really really good. Hopefully, he doesn't make too many of those mistakes on the Sundays or the Mondays. But where, you know, what do you like about him? I guess obviously, you know, he got Jared Patterson got a lot of yards behind his butt. But what do you like
Yeah,
about him?
and the one thing that you probably haven't seen a lot of is him like playing within a certain like a dense or a more complicated scheme, because a lot of what Buffalo did on the offensive line was really simple, because they didn't ask them to do a lot. It's just simple slide protection stuff, some kind of stretch type plays, zone type footwork type stuff. He'll have the chance to kind of show out when he goes to the collegiate gridiron showcase, and a lot of the times we know that the performance at those practices and at those chances to work in front of scouts, or even if it's remote and just putting film out there away from the field, sometimes that's what interests pro scouts. And Awosika, I mean, he has been a stalwart on that line for I think 3 years now, and they they went 8 games in 2018 without allowing a sack before like late in the season, surrendering a couple with the MAC championship game. And I mean, those were rushers like Josh Corcoran and Sutton Smith he was going up against, and then who are basically two pros. And then you've got 2019, another good season for Buffalo. I don't have much in the way of like measurables or anything from that for that season, but I mean, 2020 was obviously supremely efficient year, and Buffalo was putting it together all season, and Awosika was the best lineman on that squad. And to be recognized as one of the best offensive lines in college football in a G5 conference, and being told not only are you the most productive and efficient lineman on that group, maybe like between him and I think I want to say the Nowitzki kid, Awosika was the tenured guy, he was the experienced guy, and he was the most kind of highly thought after future pro on that line, at least as far as I understand it. So he should be an end of the draft pick, I think, and I think he warrants it.
He played in a system where it asked him to run block, two-thirds of the time essentially, and he was very good at that. The NFL is growing more and more like a passing league, kind of modernizing. So one would think, oh, well, shouldn't he be better at the pass game? Hopefully for himself, he does good in the pass blocking. But if he ends up just only being I don't want to say one-trick pony, but if he only ends up being someone that's uber productive in the run blocking scheme, but not so
Mhm.
much in the pass game, there's still, rotational places for a guy like that in the league if he can at least prove himself sure-handedly at that level. Let's move down the list though. Kind of go alphabetical by last name here. I got Antwan Davis coming up from Ball State. He's someone that Ball State really really liked. He played a lot. Got hurt though in 2018 because he only played one game there. But still in 2017, he had 17 catches over 7 games, had a full season in each of the last 2 years. Didn't get all the looks in the world, but still he was really productive and he was really committed to the program. He's not the biggest receiver in the world, but he is pretty freaking athletic and he is pretty freaking strong. And he's got some pretty good speed on him too. So I'd like to see, where does Antwan Davis end up? He might be one of those, flyer 5th round, 6th round receivers that teams end up taking because they like his measurables or they like a certain skill set that he presents. So Davis's pro days ahead of him are going to be pretty interesting to see.
Mhm.
And I'd like to see, how he ends up in the league.
Yeah, and for him, he's an interesting one because he's an unconventional prospect. I know a lot of, and you've already mentioned that a lot of teams are, and I knocked my camera. A lot of teams are looking for. I love that I hit my camera and it takes several seconds for it to register for anybody else. Um, there are so many teams going heavy pass that someone like Davis someone like Davis is maybe a more alluring prospect right now than he would have been like a decade ago or maybe 15 years ago.
Well, I
And
mean, he would be 11, so
thanks, Alex. Thank you. He doesn't look like a wide receiver, first of all. He's 5'11, 204. He looks like an H-back in a college offense. And you're watching him and it's like, is he wearing chest protectors and like big old bulky pads? But he's just a fairly big dude who plays wide receiver and still moves well. He's efficient around the red zone, tends to make catches in traffic. He didn't even start at Ball State. He played at Lincoln University in Missouri first. So he was playing a smaller college football to begin his career. And then his redshirt sophomore season at Ball State in 2017 started getting got some starts. Then 2019 was a good season for him, starting 12 games, third on the team receptions. Then this year, the production wasn't like you didn't ask a lot of him because of the two super talented wide receivers they had. But I mean, he could fill a role.
it's a shame that Bryson Denley had to play at Bowling Green when he did, because he wasn't getting the ball nearly enough, but he had the speed that killed. Denley was super duper awesome. Was really under the radar. I didn't realize he played as many games as he had over his 4 years at Bowling Green. Looks like 3 games as a freshman, 12 as a sophomore and junior, and then 5 this past year. And then he is out of there, and I don't blame him. This past year, he did have 39 catches for 146 yards, but he's also super, super, super productive with the kick returns. 412 yards in the kick return game, 27 and a half per return. Like, he just has speed that gets paid. Like, that's all that it comes to it. Like, he's so good at, other things in his game, but that is truly where he separates himself from the rest of the pack, is with his
Yeah.
speed. And there is always a job for someone like that.
And he's got to make his money on special teams, and that's it. He's got to be able to fill several roles on special teams. Without doing that, he's not really going to have much of a chance. But his upside in that part of the game is high. So do it well enough, someone's going to pay you. But he's just got to find where that is going to work, because if he isn't an outstanding kick returner, then he doesn't have a role, in my opinion.
Since we're just gonna have a run of just skilled offensive players. Actually, the rest of our list -1 is that D. Eskridge, probably the most talented receiver that we're gonna talk about out of the MAC this year. Probably one of the best chances to get drafted early.
I guess I just don't know how he's projected, and a lot of teams feel they can draft receivers into lower rounds. But Eskridge is definitely the most exciting wide receiver out of this year's group, and the most exciting player in the MAC in a lot of facets this year. So, I mean, Patterson may have been the offensive player of the year, but Eskridge was the type where you just didn't know what was going to happen anytime he touched the ball. So, in that respect, an NFL team has to find a way to get him on that roster, see what he can do. So, it wouldn't surprise me that with a really high 40 time, I don't know what his top end speed is, and then maybe some catching some clean balls and showing off his athleticism in a pro day type setting, or a skill workout setting, could really wow some people and could end him up on draft boards, definitely.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that he'd be so excellent as a college receiver. I don't know how excellent of a pro receiver he'll be. Not that smart, but I know that if you're patient enough with him, he's gonna make it work for you, because that was 2020 was so impressive for him. And he also, SOS from the Denley comments, he has the speed that kills too.
Yeah.
Who doesn't have the speed to kill but will punch you anyways? Caleb Huntley. You need guys that are gonna be forces up the middle when they have the rock. Caleb Huntley runs like he's pro fracking.
You stole that.
I mean, yeah, that's my trademarked scouting report, I guess. Where's your excitement level with Huntley? Because he was, not only is he a powerful guy, when we talk about power backs, we just talk about, they're the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He ran for over 1,000 yards multiple times. He's awesome. He did it as a freshman.
And
like
if anybody,
Huntley was reliable, but the problem is that now he's got some busted ribs.
Yeah, and this is the season for a lot of people to just dive into film of guys that they've heard good things about but haven't actually seen the film yet. I mean, you're gonna want to watch that Eastern Michigan game film. Alex probably is just like wincing on the inside, or externally. Yeah, but I mean, watch the Eastern Michigan game film from the 2020 season. It's ridiculous, and he's the type of guy that he has. He's got good feet despite the fact that he's not going to be trying to go left and right and juke anybody out of their shoes. But he's just a sturdy dude, and he has to have a chance at the professional level. I think that he could be an excellent like CFL running back, but I do think if he wants to play in the NFL, he could make a roster, and maybe with some preseason, maybe standing out in a preseason game, he might catch some eyes.
Malcolm Koonce is an awesome defensive player. I remember you and I talking, did he or did he not need the film against Marshall to better his odds to get drafted, blah, blah, blah. He was already an early accepted invitee for the Reese's Senior Bowl. So I have to think that there's already some hype on his side. How much do you like him, though?
I honestly wanted to see more film, and I wanted to see him against not better offensive line, but I know earlier I mentioned that Tommy Doyle was probably the highest graded out potential pro, but Koonce could be up there too. I've seen him as high as somebody's 8th ranked edge rusher or edge defender. So he's got a decent body for it. Obviously, you'd want to be a little bit bigger if he was going to play a lot of snaps or if he was going to, make a big difference in a run game, for example. But I don't really know how he grades out in terms of that and being a run stopper. He does get home enough, and he has gotten home enough to the quarterback that he's made some really exciting plays. A lot of teams fear him. A lot of teams game plan around him up front. How do you get bodies on him? So he's going to make somebody he's going to be in camp somewhere. Somebody's going to spend a draft pick on him because of his upside, and I think so. I would not be surprised to see him in 6th round. If he drops to out of the draft, then it's somebody missed, and someone's going to be really lucky when they sign him.
Someone who really bet on themselves this year, Isaiah McCoy, was the first junior to leave early of the two, Isaiah McCoy and Jared Patterson being the other. McCoy, I'm not surprised that, he's heading to the NFL. I think he absolutely should be. He is in the Exos program, which helped groom a lot of really good prospects, especially as of recent. It's probably not something that a lot of people have heard of, especially not me. But it got guys like, Patty Mahomes into the league and, the half of the first 2 rounds of the last draft. So apparently that's a good program to go into. McCoy, big-bodied guy, was obviously a reason for Dustin Crum to get so many yards this past year, or, past 2 years, really. But McCoy, over his career, 123 catches, 1,700 yards, 1,750, 16 touchdowns. Obviously super productive, really big, really strong. Do you see someone taking a shot at McCoy?
I don't know that I see him being drafted. I also haven't seen really any projections on him. The ability to get down the field and add a little bit of separation at the end of the route on, whether it's like a 7, whether it's like a go or whatever, is really alluring. But just running down the field isn't really enough to grade out super well among draft prospects, unless you're running, like a 4.29 or whatever, which Eskridge probably could. But I don't know where he is as a pro prospect because he has size. A lot of people are going to like that. He has speed. He can separate. I don't know where he stands as a route runner, and I don't think he's particularly special as a route runner. So I'm curious to see what he looks like when they're training him or they're sending him through some skills work, and then what analysts start to say as they see him more. So maybe we'll hear a little bit more about him, but even as productive as he was, it still has felt like he's flown under the radar the last few years.
Let's try to wrap this up. We have a couple more names to get to. We've already gone through 8. The ninth one we're going to get to another Bowling Green guy. We have more Bowling Green guys on this list than we do defensive players. Quentin Morris, converted receiver to tight end. He had 13 touchdowns his first 3 years at Bowling Green. Then he moved to tight end in 2020. None there. I'm not going to knock that against him for reasons I already said earlier on Bryson Denley. But Quentin Morris, he was, again, an early accepted invitee to the Reese's Senior Bowl. I just don't know, enough about him, which is why we have to put him on this list of guys that we need to look out for, because this is the time to learn a lot about him, because obviously, unfortunately, October and November was not a good time to learn about him.
Yep. And I was higher on Morris because I've just kind of, I've seen what he's done the last couple of years, seen like the type of body he's got on him, and that as far as for a tight end, he's got a good skill set. He moves well, and he's a type of versatile player with a big body that will appeal to some scouts for sure. I couldn't tell you honestly how physical a guy is and how strong he is. I haven't seen those measurables, but I think he's the type of guy who could make a roster and actually play. I just don't know how high. Like I think he has. I do think he has upside. Bowling Green's not the program to, show out the best of your abilities in the last couple of years. They just haven't been there. So it's hard to say how good he could have been.
Last guy on this list, another guy that left early, but the one that's been on everyone's mind, Jarrett Patterson, who should have been at least in the top 10 of the Heisman ballot voting.
Yeah.
Spencer Hall put him third.
That's why we love Spencer.
1,000 yards at least in each of his 3 seasons rushing. 1,013 as a freshman. Let's call it 1,800 as a sophomore. 1,072 this past year. 52 career touchdowns. 19 touchdowns this past year. I think 19 were scored in the first 19 quarters. Like, that's unreal, man. That is unreal.
Dude,
I'm going to miss Jarrett Patterson so much. I don't know how much time I want to waste the next few months thinking oh, he's better than this one, which I'm going to end up thinking a lot like that, but I feel guilty for already comparing him to others, because we're never going to see anything like this again. I don't think we're going to see another running back like this, and I kind of just want to enjoy the ride with this guy.
Yeah.
But for a more educated approach to this, Caleb, how should we preview, the send-off of Jarrett Patterson and into the working world?
I will say that he did about as much in his last year of, before going pro as somebody could do. He went from being like, hey, Buffalo has a productive running back. He's pretty good for the MAC, to, okay, this guy could get drafted.
Yeah, no, he's amazing.
I don't know where he lands. I haven't looked, to be honest with you. This is something we'll look at. Well, I'm sure we'll see more of later. I think Alex is in agreement about this. We'd love to talk to somebody who does this for a living to see where they stand on guys like Jarrett Patterson. Obviously, he's a small guy and with great feet, not top end speed, but super, makes cuts that helps him to avoid heavy contact. He makes things look really easy on the football field without just amazing you with his athleticism. And so when you watch his film, you'll kind of understand how satisfying it is to watch him run the football. And so obviously we'd be dumb not to include him on this list. There's where he stands in terms of being an outstanding pro versus a serviceable pro or short-term pro. I actually don't know.
Yeah, and and we've said it before, where we kind of get scared about overhyping, guys from the MAC who are tremendous in college to, oh, this will obviously translates to the NFL, because we really just don't know. We've seen guys that should be amazing just not make it at all. I was watching highlights a couple of days ago of Jordan Lynch's, debut, in the NFL as a running back for his hometown Chicago Bears, and didn't do squat. But Jaret Patterson, he's going to get a shot. Obviously, he's going to get multiple shots even if the first one doesn't work out. And so that it'll be obviously super, 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 super fun to watch as he gets into all that. I do want to point out that we're not smart enough to talk about how good players are, but Barry Sanders is, and Barry Sanders on Twitter compared Jaret Patterson to Darren Sproles. So
just a little bit less bulky, less like a bowling ball, I suppose. And so Patterson's gonna be one of those guys that we're super excited to see where they shake out. There's a couple other guys, whether it's, we're not going to go much into detail, just mention them in brief. Bryce Cottrell from Ohio, an offensive lineman, is a guy who's been around a few years and could play. Ohio tends to have a couple linemen a year make camps, and so we'll see. Daniel Crawford from NIU, Mike Caliendo of Western's been pretty consistent for those guys, and they've turned up some really good linemen in recent years, so they do well in that respect. And then David Moore is someone we've mentioned recently. I'm not super high on him because I just haven't seen enough of him, but maybe there's something there. Maybe he's a pro, maybe he's a CFL pro or a smaller league pro, or I don't know. And then Alex, you go with Jalen Moore because I think you know more about him than I do.
No, not really.
Well, he's another offensive line prospect. So,
yeah.
And we just thought he was worth putting on there. Other than that, Antonio Nunn, obviously most productive receiver for Buffalo, gave them a vertical aspect to that offense. Antonio Phillips and Emmanuel Rugamba, two set cornerbacks. I kind of felt like remiss about not putting another defensive back on there, but because I feel like somebody will probably make an impact. But Rugamba didn't really have a chance to show out this year because of the short amount of games. Andy struggled a little bit against Ball State. Raekwon Tomas Ishman as well, another offensive line. So again, Max Awash and offensive line prospects this year, and maybe teams are going to pull off a steal, whether it's at the end of the draft or whether it's in the immediate free agency period right after.
Yeah. So anyways, that's the 10, I guess, plus names that we're going to mention on here for draft prospects to watch. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more names that we should be throwing in here. If there's someone you want to talk about, let us know in the comment section. I hate being that fucking guy. I hate YouTube. But again, thank you for listening. We'll be back with another episode to catch up in the